Hello and welcome to the Crate and Crowbar, a PC gaming podcast. It's episode 126 on, get this, the 26th of the 2016. Amazing. My name's Chris Thurston and today I'm joined by Tom Francis.
Hello.
And Marsh Davies.
Hello.
What news this week, gentlemen?
Her Story 2 has been announced.
It has.
To her 2-story, as it will have to be called.
Wonder if you search for that in the searchy dialogue-y box, it'll turn anything up. I hope so.
Yeah, come on, Sam Barlow, get on it.
Tokyo Drift was the first thing I tried.
Yeah, exactly. In any game of that type. I haven't actually heard anything about this yet because I wanted to sort of spare myself.
There isn't really anything. So he posted on Twitter a blurred out document and said, "Oh, HS2 has a one sheet now. Cool." And that was it. And people have pointed out that deblurring technologies exist, but
you wouldn't.
Obviously, you wouldn't really want to read it, right?
I don't think the deblurring technology is good enough to deblur that. I don't know. They're just flat colours.
But anyway, you wouldn't want to as a fan because it's presumably spoils the entire plot. I would think. But it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see whether it's the same system, because that was he's got a choice now as to whether a Her Story game is a game where you search for terms in video clips, or whether a Her Story game is just a story, an interactively discoverable narrative, and he has to come up with a whole new method of doing that. Because that system was really what made it work so well.
It risks being a little bit weird to have, if it's the same system and a different mysterious woman, then it becomes a game about something other than what it was originally about.
Yeah, it's a shame because I really like that interface and the way of telling it, but I don't know how much mileage there is in the, you're looking through an old police archive on a really old computer narrative framing device.
Yeah. Going back, solving the problems of mystery women from the past.
Yeah, it's so specific, it's hard to repeat.
It's a bit, I mean, this was far too early to say this is definitely the case, but it's kind of the Serial Season 2 issue in a way where it's, you need a spiritual successor to this thing that was a sort of perfect storm of subject matter and delivery and everything else. But it can't be exactly the same thing. But if it's not exactly the same thing, then it might be worse. Yeah. That's more of a comment on Serial Season 2.
And it is in Serial 2. Yeah. Unfortunately.
But I suppose when things are enormously commercially and critically successful and win shitloads of awards, they get sequels. Which is why it was announced in the same week as Frozen 2. Which with it will share nothing.
I missed that bit of news, strangely.
Also this week, finally released after many years of not really knowing what it was, if you're me, The Witness.
7 years.
Really? Is it?
7 years and $6 million, I think.
7. All things considered, Jonathan Blow did not pee very much in that time.
Yeah, I've been playing it. Well, I played, I don't know what my Steam count says, probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours of it just now. It's very pretty. It's very pretty indeed. It's really interesting looking, actually, because it's, I initially wanted to call it low poly, but I think it's not low poly at all. I think it's accentuated poly. So you've got all these environments which are probably the same number of polys as any environment in any other kind of AAA game. It's just that they've not made any effort to hide any of the polygons. In fact, they've done a lot to kind of make each kind of corner feel chiseled and really kind of three-dimensional and tactile in a way, which I don't think I've seen in other games. I don't know.
I always thought it had quite a sort of painted style in texturing, at least.
Yeah, I think games have achieved a new kind of aesthetic because although the rendering style of games takes a lot from art, so this has kind of painterly looking clouds that are look like they've been painted with a brush, but they are volumetric as well. And that creates a new experience I don't think you have in other mediums, even if they are aping kind of paintbrush techniques or kind of impressionistic paint. Like the textures in what's the game which has Dunwall in it? Dishonored, thank you, yeah. The textures in that, you go up to them and you can see they've kind of been painted, and they've not made an effort to make it look like grouting on a tile. They've just kind of splashed paint on it to make it look impressionistic. And I think that weird mixture of kind of fidelity and intentional unreality is kind of fairly unique to games. Because although you can have impressionistic paintings and, pointillism and all this other stuff, none of that combines that with the kind of immediate reality of being within a 3D world, which has been rendered for you in some, The Witness has amazing lighting in it, really kind of super feeling realistic lighting. So you've got all this bounce light, you go into these kind of desert, canyons and stuff, all this bounce light off the sand onto the walls, and kind of gives it this kind of rich underglow. And that feels extremely real, but at the same time, it's in this environment which is obviously full of artifice and very beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny that they play up any of the Unreal elements, because they went to extraordinary lengths to make sure that it was completely sort of authentic as a place, like it could exist, because they have several architects working on it to examine all the buildings that they made and whether they would be built that way, and things like, you'd never have a marble pillar on a wooden floor. There has to be something stronger underneath that. Or this staircase on the other side of the building doesn't have enough support, so it couldn't stand up like that.
It really, I find that very, I'll get to why that's a really good thing, I think, in a bit. But to say what the game is, it's a first-person puzzle game. Now, obviously, John Blow made Braid, which is one of the best puzzle games of the last, apparently 7 years. And this is obviously his follow-up. It is not as immediately discombobulating as Braid's mechanic is. Braid, you played with the nature of time, you could rewind things, and it did lots of things to kind of squeeze every possible idea out of that mechanic. And this, on the surface, is a lot more kind of banal. You wake up, I don't know, you walk down this weird tube thing and you end up in these kind of ruins on an island, and you're surrounded by all these kind of puzzle constructions, basically, that seemingly left there for you to play with and solve. Some are half dilapidated, so it's not quite clear what the storyline is, if there is indeed a storyline. But all of the puzzles follow a central conceit, which is that they are a panel on which there is some sort of grid-like maze, and you trace from the beginning of the maze to the end of the maze. And then the panel unlocks or powers a tube which is going somewhere else. Sorry, a cable, that's what they're called. Which can then, which either powers up other puzzles or powers up doors, and yeah, it's quite, and that's kind of a simple way of just chaining your progress through the game. Although it does open up and branch, and there's lots of different places you can go, that central conceit seems to be uniform. However, it evolves in surprising ways. If you've I know Tom's played Alcazar, the phone game. It feels a lot similar to that. So there's puzzles where instead of just simply tracing from one end of this maze to another, you have to trace a line so that it fills, so that it goes through certain checkpoints, so that it fills a kind of every part of the maze. When you start tracing, perhaps a mirror trace will begin. You have to find a way of tracing both of these lines through the maze, and that gets more complicated as different kind of lines of symmetry are drawn through the puzzle. There are puzzles where you have to draw a line so that it groups together the white dots that are in the negative space of the maze and separates them from the black dots that are otherwise elsewhere in the maze. And it keeps them going. There's loads and loads of different puzzles, and it's beautiful the way that it explains the puzzles to you and allows you to progress through them. Sometimes it will throw a really hard puzzle at you, and you'll have to kind of work out. You'll try and based on your knowledge of other puzzles, you'll be playing with this thing which is probably too complex for you to understand. You need it to kind of pare back the number of possibilities so that you can actually understand what the puzzle is asking of you. And it's quite nice to either crack that through your own brilliance, as I did, or then but it's equally satisfying just to go on and then stumble across the kind of a simpler version of that, and then that explains itself to you. Then you apply that logic back to the earlier puzzle that you came across.
Does it? The thing that's sort of weirded me out about what I've seen of the game over the years is just that interface. I've sort of never doubted that those maze puzzles would be brilliant maze puzzles, but the fact that they're all maze puzzles and they're all on these just iPads basically, and it's also abstract and just like, here's a puzzle for puzzle's sake. Someone designed a puzzle for you to solve the puzzle. Whereas Braid, the puzzles you're solving, the elements of them were kind of representative. You know, you're a person jumping on little monsters, and you are using keys to open doors, and making those elements do interesting things to each other was kind of, to me, satisfying, partially because of what it represented. If he was a white dot and there were just red dots that you're trying to get past, it would have been less interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same kind of scintillation as that on the face of it. However, it does do interesting things with it, playful things with it. So there's, you know, as you say, these kind of iPad-like panels. Well, some of them have melted and deformed, and so the puzzle lines that you're drawing are strange. But it doesn't kind of labour that. It's just thrown in there as a single kind of joke, almost. And that's what kind of allows it to keep enough variety to, I think, keep you interested. There are other puzzles where I don't know how this is going to work on worse machines than mine, because it requires specular lighting to be particularly visible on so you can see from the bounce light off the way it's kind of diffuses on the texture on the surface, diffracts. What do I mean diffuses? I know, scatters. The way it scatters, the way the light scatters on the surface of this iPad, and when it's at a certain angle, you can tell where it has been scratched previously, so you can see where the lines have previously been drawn.
Right.
So that kind of reliance on texture and lighting technology is not necessarily as scalable as some of the other puzzles, but I'd be interested to see.
I'm sure they have got it to work, because I remember reading a lot about how they're optimizing it, because I think it's coming out on iPad, isn't it?
Wow. Okay.
I remember that was at some point the intention, because I was reading about all the challenges of getting that stuff. Well, not that stuff, but specifically, but all the effects they want to do working on mobile. And I follow Casey Muratori, who's one of the programmers on it, and he and John were equally opinionated about programming, and rant regularly about all the inefficiencies inherent in the languages they use and the tools they use, and also in the way other people use those tools and how they use them inefficiently. And so much of it comes down to just they are both pretty against the kind of things that I use. You know, I work in Game Maker, which does so much for you, and Unity is very similar. And one of the things that those tools don't really let you do is like memory management and stuff like that. And there's no real kind of like gameplay reason why you need to manage the memory, is that I can think of. But the main thing is just performance. If you know exactly where everything's being stored in your program and how it's being stored and when it's got rid of and when it's loaded in and when it's not, then you can fine tune things to a much greater degree. And therefore you can make your game run much better on lower spec machines. And so almost everything they rant about on a daily basis is something where they're sort of saying you shouldn't do it the way that I'm doing it. And I never worry too much about it, because they're not saying it's not going to work the way I'm doing it. They're just saying it will run much less efficiently. Whereas if you're making it all from scratch, then you can make it run way more efficiently.
Yeah, I suppose I could see why the game would scale quite well, because obviously there's not that many moving parts to the world, at least.
With the exception of a melted puzzle or one where it's been interacted with the environment somewhere, what is the role of the island that you're on? Because that's confused.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not far enough in the game to find out. There are clues that there is a story there. I came across a dictaphone which played a recording, which gave me a quote from Einstein that I didn't really understand.
You must solve the maze puzzle. Einstein.
Discovered the secret to the island.
But it's a really varied kind of topography. The island is gorgeous. There's kind of these beautiful blossom trees, and there's a kind of desert with some kind of pseudo Egyptian style building in it. And I think it quite nicely matches the puzzles that you're doing in quite clever ways. So that I finished a set of puzzles, and I was coming up this kind of path alongside this bay area, and the bay area is bridged by this kind of beautiful rock bridge. It's probably a better synonym for that rather than just repeating the word bridge twice, but never mind. And the water is this perfect kind of reflective surface, and you can see everything is just rising up from this mirror image of itself in the water. And then I kind of twigged, that's where all the mirror puzzles are. And not only that, but the island's actual puzzles themselves kind of have a relationship to the symmetry of where they're placed as well, which is, it's neat. And if it keeps on doing those kind of surprising things by in some way, staking the puzzles metaphorically in the environment in some ways is really kind of cool.
I think I'm going to approach it as just like the best, most absurdly over-engineered version of Alcazar ever made.
Yes, it really is that. I would say there are some things about it give me pause. There are some puzzles which punish you if you get them wrong, and it makes you do the last puzzle again.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
But which is completely trivial because the last puzzle is still displayed. And it's, so you just look at the puzzle that it's in front of you, and then you just do it again, which is the same as tracing a line from so it's pointless, and it just means you're trekking back. I think it's to stop you, abusing puzzles that could be simple enough to do by trial and error.
Brute forcing.
But I just don't think that's really a problem. Like, I mean, if somebody wants to try and error it, they're not going to get that far in the game, and if they do, then good for them. And I think some of the puzzles, at least, my mistaken impression initially was that one of the puzzles required some trial and error, and it didn't. But the reason for that was not obvious to me. So I felt the game was a bit shitty, making me go back and forth. And I don't care to be punished for experimentation. That doesn't seem interesting to me at all. And I suspect that. As with Braid, actually, some of the kind of larger puzzles will probably require pain on your part. There seems to be it's an environment that you have to walk across, so that instantly provides punishment, a potential for punishment, in just simply wasting your time trekking back and forth. If there are some puzzles will require you to memorize one puzzle that you've already done and then apply the same solution to another puzzle, but in a different line of symmetry. So you have to and a lot of the puzzles, I think this is probably, I don't know if this is a criticism of it or not, would be trivial if I had a second monitor, because I just screenshot it, open the screenshot and then flip it. And instead I'm drawing on a piece of paper, but I don't know that makes it much more satisfying. Like, those puzzles which require me to memorize a thing and then flip it, it just seems, it's not a challenge in any way. It's just absorbing my time. And I wonder if there's going to be a lot more of that.
Apparently this is a game that respects your time and there's no filler in it at all, according to the Steam store page description.
I don't think it's filler. Like, I think it's intentional. It's not just there to pad out with meaningless examples of a particular idea. It's just I don't find that particular idea enrapturing in any way.
Why is it called The Witness?
I don't know yet. Who knows? Who could say? Probably John Blow.
18 hours in, someone just gets shot on the island. Like, oh shit, and then they just fly you back home and you have to testify.
Death on Maze Puzzle Island by Agatha Christie. It's like Little Soldier Boys.
Well, the reason you've lost your memory, which apparently you have, again, according to the Steam store description.
Oh, okay.
You're an amnesiac. About time there's one of those in games. Maybe that's because this is the most secure witness protection program ever, and they just knock you out, wipe your memory, put you on an island with no other people at all. No one can ever find you.
And then you starve to death. Great protection there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm really liking what I played of it so far. But I'm sure I have more thoughts upon it next week.
As will I.
What you been playing, Tom?
Must look back and forth from Chris to Tom, as if undecided.
Tom won.
Last week I talked about Oxenfree, and I'd only played a little bit of it at that point, and I've completed that now. So I wanted to check back in with that, to say that it remains brilliant all the way too. It's really, really good. And last time I said something cryptic about, something I thought it might be doing, but I couldn't be sure yet. And it is doing that exciting thing. And it's really, really cool. And I can't say anything more about it, but it was just like all the way through, it got clearer and clearer what it was doing.
Well, a meaningless review.
That should be like the
it would be
back
a big
of the box
spoiler
quote.
to say anything more about it.
With the Game of the Year award ?
And it's by some of the, also last week I said that, I'd never heard of the studio that made it. And, I think they started to make this game. The studio was started in order to make this game, and they are some ex-Telltale people. And I watched, the first part of a sort of making of, thing. They're doing something not quite like the Double Fine thing, but just sort of interviews with them. They have some kind of publisher, and I think the publisher does it. But apparently their objective with it was to make the walk and talk game, because they were sick of adventure games how you just have to walk for ages, then stop, then you talk for ages, and then you walk for ages. And then they're thinking, well, surely these two things can be combined. And so sure enough, you spend almost all of the game in the company of at least one other person, sometimes 4 other people. And as you're walking around, the conversation unfolds as you go. And that's one of the things I really liked about it. And the way conversations can kind of layer and interrupt each other, and you looking at an item can interrupt. The one problem I had with it was that there's just one little flaw in how that's implemented, which is that sometimes someone's saying something that you can't interrupt, which is fair enough. There's always going to be like important lines of dialogue. But during those times, the little markers that show you what's interactive in the environment go away. And they go away completely. So if someone's saying something important when you go into an environment, until they finish, you can't tell what's interactive and what's not. And because you're walking, you'll be walking past stuff. And one time, I was walking with the guy and he was talking to me and we're having a good conversation. And then by the time we got to the other end of the room, he finished. And then suddenly something way across the other side of the scene was highlighted as interactive. So when I walked by it, I had no way of knowing I could have interacted with it. And in fact, I couldn't have because you can't until he finishes. And then by the time he's finished, I've just got to trek all the way back there to touch it now. And sometimes you can run, but most of the time you can't. And there's no sort of way of controlling that. So it's just like a long period of walking back to things that you couldn't have known were interactive. And then, so the next time I'm like, okay, well, that's annoying. So I walked past a door and a guy was talking to me and I wanted to know whether the door was interactive. So I just stopped by the door and just waited. And he stops walking, but he carries on talking to you. And then he asks you for a response. And I'm like, well, I just want the conversation to be over. So I just said nothing. And the response times out like it does in The Walking Dead as well. And then he asked me something else. And so I'm just standing there just refusing to communicate with this person because I need to know whether this door is interactive. And I can't find that out until you shut up. Which is, I don't think, the intent of that system. I wish it would be so easy to solve because it would just like put the markers there, but have it be a little hourglass that just tells you, can't use this yet, but it is usable. So, hang around here if you want to use this thing. The plot, it's really interesting because I had a bunch of unfair judgments about it when I finished because, there's a kind of, there are several different like romance sub-threads in it. And I remember thinking at the end, it's weird they didn't wrap that up. I would have thought, if making a game where, there's only 4 characters, then you'd wrap up, at least the romance between these two. And then I discovered that was the result of my decisions that didn't get resolved. And also there's another thing about the ending that was just worked out really, really well. And I thought that's a bit too well, really. It's a bit of a kind of, almost fairy tale ending. And I discovered that was a result of my actions as well. And that apparently only 18% of people did that.
Oh, right.
And it's really, you're having way more influence than you realize as you're playing it. And, every decision I made was massively unpopular in terms of what other players did. Like it shows you pie charts at the end, and there's, I think, 4 or 5 major decisions, major outcomes, which are a result of many different decisions and things you say. And yeah, I think the most common one was, like 18% of players did it. And one of them was, only 4% of players did it. And that one was, last week I was saying there's a guy called Jonas who it was obviously meant to be a love interest or can be a love interest. And I just didn't like him. Only 4% of people, including me, did not bond with Jonas in any way. There's other options that pie chart. I don't know what they are. I assume you can, become quite friendly. But I was quite proud that I managed to just completely avoid that whole thing.
Anywhere on a spectrum from quite friendly to grown-up friendly.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to... I'm very worried about spoilers for this game. Like, I wouldn't be a spoiler because I don't know how far you can take it with Jonas. But there was some other clever stuff where there was a bit where the people wanted you to choose who to take with you to go on a certain little leg of your quest. And I just spent a bunch of time with Jonas and kind of wanted to change it up and spend some time with someone else. And there's also someone else I liked more. And it was also there was a good reason to take him. And they both wanted to come with me, but I had to pick one of them. And whoever I picked, the other one was going to be pissed off with me. So I didn't pick Jonas, I picked the other one. And later, again, I don't want to say anything about what happened, but that decision backfired in a way that I just hadn't anticipated just because I was in game mode and I was only thinking about myself. And actually, if I thought about, like, okay, if I'm with that person, that means the other 2 are together. And so you're not just deciding who's with you, you're deciding who's with each other back at the place. Sorry, it's going to be hopelessly.
Meanwhile, in the place, the people, are they?
And so
M. Night Shyamalan's description of Oxenfree.
You have to be less selfish in your thinking than you might normally assume as a player. I make every decision based on what I want and how I want to spend my time. And if I'd been more considerate of other people's feelings, something in the plot would have worked out in a way that I wanted it to work out.
Didn't think of what Jonas wanted, did you?
No. Well, actually I did. And
but who can say?
We need like a spoiler podcast about this, because all the interesting stuff is stuff that you can't even sort of roughly describe without spoiling it. The other game I played was Darkest Dungeon, which has been in early access for at least a year, and is now finally out. And I've heard it raved about lots. And it's a very gothic 2D dungeon crawling game with turn-based combat, where you return to town between each expedition, and it's very randomized. Like, you get random roster of people, and I think the sort of treasures you find and the enemies you encounter are somewhat randomized. And when you go into the dungeon, all your people are in like a sort of side on, and all your people are in a queue. And when you meet enemies, they're also in a queue, and your order in that queue is kind of the main structure of the combat. So if you're melee, you need to be at the front, obviously. And if you're like one place back, you can still attack with melee. But then if you're like 3 places back, you have to use ranged. And then there are weird rules about like, if you're using a ranged attack, sometimes you can't attack the person who's in front of the enemy stack, even if you're quite far back in your stack, and you can spend your turn to move a person around. And it's very finicky and sort of technical. It's obviously like, it's a strategy game, basically, the combat, but it's a very abstract strategy game in terms of what you can and can't do. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's presented as a very sort of, not realistic, but representative thing. You're seeing rogues and warriors and beastmasters and arbalest people with big crossbows, and their abilities sort of sound like that they are conventional physical attacks, but then the rules that govern them are very strict and kind of to do with placement and stuff. And a big part of it is sanity. So as you're exploring just all the time, your people are losing sanity, or gaining stress is actually how they phrase it. And then between missions, to recover that, you have to put them in either the monastery or the tavern, and or it might be chapel. And the chapel has like flagellation treatments and prayer and one other. And then the tavern is like the brothel, gambling and drinking. And your people, as they get stressed, once their stress meter kind of caps out, they have a kind of moment of crisis, and they can either sort of randomly rise to the crisis and actually develop a positive trait, like, determined or something, or they can just have a breakdown and develop a negative trait, like scared of coves. That was one of them I got.
Coves?
Coves, like...
As in, like, the Bay Areas?
Yeah.
Or scoundrels.
That's what it said.
Yeah.
Cove-phobic.
Okay.
Fucked in a needed Blighton book.
Yeah.
One of my rogue developed deviant...
An allergy to ginger beer, you'd be
exactly.
Sorry.
My rogue developed deviant tastes, which means he's not allowed in the brothel anymore.
Oh my god. I suppose this is vaguely Lovecraftian.
I haven't seen any sort of tentacly things yet, which is my definition of Lovecraftian. It's very, doom and gloom, and I suppose the theme of madness is Lovecraftian, but it's kind of like they just get bummed out really easily. Like, it's not like they're witnessing terrible things. And like, they get pissed off if you pass your turn in combat. That stresses them out. And it's actually really irritating because sometimes, like, I don't know when there are like 8 character classes at least that I've encountered, and I don't know what they do, so I take them in my roster, and then I find out I've taken 3 melee people and 1 ranged, and that means that there's no way for all 3 of my people to be in melee range. So when it selects the person who's in 3rd place, my only options are to pass the turn, which stresses him out, or move him. And if I move him, I've got to move him forwards, which moves another melee person back. And because it's that person's turn now, then the person who moves back, it will be their turn next, or before this guy again. So then on their turn, I've either got to move them forward or stress them out. So I've got exactly the same problem. And you can shuffle them endlessly, in which case they never do anything, but they don't get stressed out. Or you've got to make them stressed out by just telling them to stand there.
That is a weird problem to have.
there's a lot of weird problems in this game. It took me ages to find out just how I get to my stuff. I keep finding all this cool stuff. In fact, I still don't know. There's two different kinds of stuff. There's like trinkets, which are like things you actually wear to buff your people. And then there's just stuff like shovels and torches and just equipment that gets you through, like bandages and things like that. Find loads of both those things. And then when I'm out of the actual dungeon, like clicking on your people does nothing. And dragging them places does nothing. There's a chest that shows your inventory of trinkets, but you can't drag them to the people. You can't equip them in any way that I could see. And then when you start going into the dungeon, it takes you to the shop before you do. And in your inventory then is just like a single bottle, and it's a different bottle each time. Sometimes it's holy water, sometimes it's a healing balm, sometimes it's something else. And all my rest of my stuff is gone. My shovel's gone, my torch is gone, everything else is just vanished.
That doesn't sound like it's intentional. That seems like there's something...
Yeah, I still don't understand the shovel thing, but I did figure out the trinket thing, which is you have to right-click on the people's portraits, and that brings up a special stat page, and then they got some inventory slots that you can drag trinkets from to equip them. So I figured that out.
So does it just bin all the other stuff you picked up?
The other stuff, yeah, I don't know where it's going. I tried looking up online, but it's really hard to search for it. Like I can see Let's Plays and stuff, but I can't see what's happening to their inventory either. And then the other weird thing is corpses, which I think has been talked about a fair bit by the community, which is that when you kill someone in their stack of people, their queue of people, it's obviously a very narrow dungeon. I think it's just one really, really tight corridor all the way through. And if you kill the first guy in line, the corpse becomes a solid obstacle that none of you can kind of attack past. You have to keep hitting the corpse to get rid of it. And it'll decompose over time, but it's a combat situation. You can't really wait for the corpse to decompose before you attack again. So you end up sort of either beating a dead corpse, as the saying goes, or there are some skills that sort of have a clear all corpses perk, where you do that and then it clears all the corpses.
Do the enemies have the same problem attacking over their allied corpse?
No one's ever died on my watch, so I wouldn't know. It's because I keep running away.
But do the enemies that you're fighting seem to have any kind of debuff?
Over their corpses?
Yeah.
I haven't noticed. Ranged people obviously can shoot over, I think, and they've done that, I think. I haven't noticed whether any of their melee people can shoot past, because often they only have one melee person, so the corpse is the melee person.
Right. What are you actually fighting?
So a lot of like big burly ogre-like thugs with sort of chain maces and stuff, and then sometimes sort of slithering maggot things. There have been some quite Doom-style enemies. There's an upside-down skull on spider legs, like in Doom 3.
Right.
And stuff like that.
I was just wondering, because if you fight a skeleton and you kill a skeleton, then meaningfully no real material change has taken place to the skeleton. Therefore, it is still an obstacle, sort of.
I think perhaps it's kind of not like a physical thing you can't hit past, but it takes up a slot in the queue, and therefore whether or not the person behind it counts as being in melee is
like you die in the queue, you're still in the queue.
Exactly, yeah. It's a very strange game. I haven't really got into it. I like it because it's persistent and, people develop traits, and it's cool to know, oh yeah, I can't put that guy in the brothel because he's a deviant. And I remember when that happened, it was because I fucked up and let him get blighted or something. But it hasn't quite gripped me because I'm so confused about so many little technical things. And, to play well, I need to understand all of this stuff inside out. And so I can't sort of do well at it yet. What have you been playing, Chris?
So I played a bunch last week of Torment Tides of Numenera, which is of interest to us specifically because we played the pen and paper game. And actually, I haven't talked to anybody who hasn't played the pen and paper game because I specify this is a computer RPG sequel to Torment, Planescape Torment, as well as being the first computer RPG adaptation of a pen and paper RPG system that's relatively new. So it's kind of two different things at once. It's a throwback, but it's also a genuinely new enterprise. Although it looks like a, isometric pre-rendered backdrop traditional CRPG. I would also say, before I say anything else about it, the version that came out on Steam Early Access today, I believe, that went out to beta backers last week, is super fucking raw. Like, it is, this is a, they say, you're helping us test the game, and they found this, it's In Exile, who also made Wasteland 2. This process was useful for Wasteland, so we're doing it again, but it is a test. Like, the shops don't work at the moment. The inventory barely works. Not all of the content is in. There's whole loads of placeholder stuff. There's a thing at the end of what is basically the character creation process, where it says, okay, you've just had some kind of vision. When you play the game properly, it's going to be this, and then it describes it to you in text. Anyway, what would you have chosen at the end of this? Okay, moving on. So it's that kind of thing. Like, I would say, I enjoyed it, but I would say if anyone's kind of curious about it, but really wants to have like the RPG immersive experience where you play it through and experience the story for the first time, this isn't the time. Like, this is the time to play it if you want to file a lot of bug reports, not the time to actually like invest, I think. But it's really good, and it's really it feels a lot like Planescape Torment, which maybe goes without saying, but this has been the era of old famous CRPGs coming back in Fallout and Wasteland coming back, and Pillars of Eternity essentially being Baldur's Gate. And this is a game that fundamentally remembers the reason people got so excited about Planescape Torment at the time, which is it is far more about sort of ideas and psychology and philosophy than it is about high fantasy, really. And it is also far more about storytelling and problem solving than it is about combat. So it has that Torment thing of combat being completely skippable. And this all is kind of supported by the fact that it is a relatively faithful adaptation of the Numenera system from the pen and paper system, which is weird if you know the pen and paper system, because pen and paper system is like from the ground up designed to reject a lot of the kind of big heavy systems that were introduced over time in Dungeons and Dragons. And it's almost improvisational in some ways. And, ideas are, it's designed to be run by a human GM. And obviously the game has to sort of shear off some edges to kind of make it work as a game. So in the pen and paper game, for example, if your character learns a skill, you just agree on a verb with the GM as to what that skill might be. But in the game, it has a list. So like there's a long list, but a reasonable kind of, set of kind of, restrictions on what you can do. But it still has the same sort of basic overall system, which essentially boils down to you having no health bar per se, but 3 pools, 1 might, speed, and intellect, representing basically your character's internal resources in 3 different ways, which can take damage, but can also be spent in order to make tasks easier. So when you try and do something, it'll say this is challenging, which means you've got a roughly 50% chance of getting it right if you try it as it is. Or you can say, well, I'm going to commit some of my might pool, which might also be thought of as your health bar normally, to say, I'm going to try a bit harder and do this. So essentially your health bar represents your character.
Okay, but what if I try?
Yeah, exactly. Which is, as you guys know from playing it, it's a situation where you hit where it's like, I'm going to gamble a bit more resources on this to kind of increase my chances of success. And that system's used really fluidly. The thing that's going to be really, and to give you a sense of the overall scope of the thing, the game begins with your character coming into consciousness for the first time right as they finish falling to their death, which, having maybe fallen from the moon, but it's left very unclear. Are
you a wizard? Because then someone could say that wizard came from the moon.
You can be a nano. So yeah, you can be. And then at this point this is no spoilers. This is the first 30 seconds of the game kind of stuff. You wake up inside your own kind of shifting fractal subconscious. Rebuild yourself initially by doing a series of kind of reliving a series of memories that might be yours and might not be. Which are all presented as basically a variety of, one of them is like a might or an intellect task, one of them's a speed or an intellect task, one of them's speed and might, and so on. And that's basically like a compound personality test that takes place over the first couple of minutes of the game. At the end of that first couple of minutes of the game, you see a giant mirror, in which case there's a million different versions of yourself. And you pick the one that you think is actually you from text descriptions. And that gives you your descriptor. So if you played the Numenera system, you know that your character, rather than being a level 50 rogue, is a something class that action. So the first thing you get is your adjective that describes you. So I ended up with observant from the way I'd solved those initial problems, but yes, if you guys remember doing character creation, that's kind of how you end up with that part of it. Then you go into what is apparently like the control center for your identity as a concept. This game is really, really like, so yeah, maybe I've suggested this already, but if like Pillars of Eternity really wants you to read, like that's a game that really wants you to be willing to read a lot of dialogue. Numenera is far more so. Like the game is about like thought experiments and personality tests and lots of reading and lots of detail. And it's really important that you can't skip that stuff. I think it's, you know, if you're playing a regular fantasy RPG, you can skip the reading bit because you know what a fucking elf is. You can skip ahead to fight the orcs now because you kind of get it. Whereas this is, and I haven't really got into what the setting is yet because you haven't even arrived at the setting at this point. You were still crawling out of your own broken abstractness. You can't ignore that stuff or else nothing makes any sense whatsoever. Then you enter this room where you align yourself to a new system that they've actually added that isn't in the pen and paper game, where there are 5 kind of emotional pillars to existence. And each of them represents another set of 5 personality tests.
Oh my God.
Which you have to complete while being defended from transforming heart-shaped, as in like human organic heart-shaped tentacle monsters that are the expression of a timeless creature called the Sorrow that's pursuing you through time and probably just killed you. You're protected by your first party member, who is a hologram version of yourself, maybe, as you complete 5 further personality quizzes, which identify which of the 5 kind of colors you align with, which are basically different, abstract sort of expressions of human experience. But each of the visions you have are all animals engaging in different pack behavior. It's really fucking weird. Then you escape your own mind via a portal which leads you to a choose your own adventure text twine style vignette, which I believe is based entirely on what color you're most aligned with and some of the decisions you've also made previously, which is perhaps a memory. At this point, you wake up in the real world, which is Earth, several billion years in the future.
It's good to ground the player with a nice relatable beginning.
Like it's amazing how you can almost say that there's a really snappy opening. Like the game begins with you waking up as you die, and then everything that happens after that is, I thought it was brilliant. Like it genuinely is extraordinarily well written. Like they really know what they're doing. And if you're into, if you're into Arthur C. Clarke or Jack Vance or traditional kind of high concept science fiction, then I think it's brilliant. And the whole setting is brilliant. And it's very faithful to the Numenera setting. But it really, really, really throws you in the fucking deep end, like straight away, and asks you to kind of process ideas that I know that setting reasonably well. Like I've written, scenarios for that setting and stuff, and I had to stop and think quite a lot about what was happening. And I understand a lot of the basic tenets of the world, like the fact that it's Earth in the future, but it's so far in the future that we've done a million laps around Clarke's third law and everything is magic and everything is science and everything is, kind of weird or corrupted in some way. And it's at that point that you get to what the actual kind of plot is. So where Planescape Torment was about the sort of the central question of that game is what can change the nature of a man, and mild spoilers for a 20-year-old game, but Planescape Torment was about one person living over and over and over again, like a person who kept coming back, basically. In this, the sort of the central thesis of the game is what is one life worth? And you are called a cast-off, which is, there is a person, presumably formerly like a powerful nano, which is basically a wizard in this universe, who found a way to cheat death, but it involves leaving his body or her body at the end when he doesn't want the body anymore and getting a new one. But because of the way consciousness works in the universe, apparently, you can't just do that. The body doesn't just die. It gains its own consciousness to replace the one that was lost. So you coming into being, you've basically, your consciousness, whoever you are, was born the moment this character called the Changing God into their body the moment they left to find a different form. And that's your best assumption of who you are. So but it completely subverts the chosen one thing in the kind of opening moments of the game in 2 ways. Because one, you get asked quite early on, do you think you're the Changing God or not? Because you could either be their latest incarnation of the actual God, having lost your memory, or maybe that happens every time, or you are a cast-off body that has recently become self-aware, and that decision affects how people talk to you, because you can either say, no, I think I am God, or like, no, I think I'm just a sort of cast-off body. But also, the city that you enter has several hundred years of history with the changing god in their various forms. All of the cast-offs, I think they look different, but they all have a tattoo. Or they know what the cast-offs are. There are several of them around, and most people hate them because this sort of like generation-skipping immortal prick has been kind of ruining things for everybody for a long time. So you are sort of the villain as well as the hero, and you're not unique. You are unusual, and people, respond to the fact that, oh, it's a cast-off when they meet you. But you're constantly hearing about all of the other people you've been, and all the sort of the emphasis on what's different about you and why are you going to be any different from this one that became an assassin, or this one that did this, or this one that defended the city in a time of need. And then you sort of realize, and this is very mindless towards the start of the game, that all of those different variant selves you saw at the start of the game were other cast-offs. Like that's kind of like how you've arrived at this person that you are now, by sort of picking ones that haven't happened yet and stuff. It's really interesting. Like, just as a kind of basis for, that kind of fiction, it's super cool. And then from the beginning of the game, it indulges you with a lot of options. Like, I don't want to spoil solutions to particular problems, because the joy of the game is in the conversation trees and what you can and can't do, but sort of manipulating systems and stuff. But early on, I got into a fight, somebody who was coming to basically kidnap me. And about halfway through the fight, I realized that in addition to combat actions, turn-based combat, kind of get into explaining it, but yeah, you have to think a bit, because nothing works like you'd expect it to work in a fantasy RPG, because, magic is information, which is also matter, which might be thought. But right midway through the combat system, I could see that I actually had the option to talk to the person that I had previously. So I'd done the talking, and they'd said, "No, I think we must fight now." And then halfway through the fight, I'd killed like one of his associates, and I decided I'm just going to talk to him again. And then halfway through the fight, you can go, "I'd like to stop fighting now." And he's like, "Actually, yeah, okay." And then the combat just ends. Like, they just leave. And I really like that you can do that, because it felt a lot like the pen and paper system, where what's good about it is the moment where a player has the idea, hang on, I'm just going to do this then. And you can sort of throw it out, and it's on the GM to kind of support that. So from that point of view, dead good. I'm still quite early in it, because I found myself not wanting to commit too much further in order to do it, to ruin things for myself if I'm going to kind of play it properly. But essentially, over the course of that sequence, you then end up with your full character descriptor, which is, an observant nano who has a silver tongue, speaks with a silver tongue or something like that. And that kind of all forms really naturally over the start of a character creation system. So super rad. I think it'll be great.
Do you know how long it's going to be in early access for?
It feels like it's going to be a while. Like, unless they've released this version, but it's substantially further along in other contexts. Like, saw a lot of bugs and weird shit and missing stuff and all sorts. But yeah, it's nice. It feels nice to have games back that defiantly want to be books. Like, they have no interest in being films. Like, this wants to be a big, chunky sci-fi fantasy novel that you invest loads of time in. But I think if it pays off on all the ideas it introduces at the start, then I think it could be quite special, actually, which is nice, because it's what people who liked Planescape Torment will want from it. Is a kind of, it creates similarly kind of revelatory kind of philosophy wank special time.
In the pen and paper game, there's quite a lot of, the interesting thing about the system was that we could basically just sort of make up what we wanted to do, and then you as a GM give it a difficulty rating, and then the game systems take over and we kind of roll against that difficulty. How does the game deal with like what your options are? Is it just all based on your skills, or?
So you can try pretty much anything, and then your skills change whether or not it's difficult or not. So, and I think it's obviously I remember interviewing the developers about this, because obviously it can't offer the same range of, like, so early on, again, minor detail. So there's a town square, and in the town square there's a fountain. The fountain isn't full of water, because this is fucking Numenera and everything has to be weird. It's full of tiny, purple, slithering fish that climb over each other, and each of them is screaming in a different ancient language. And you can look at this, and you can try and listen to the fish, and you can try and understand the languages, and you can do these things. But then there's a skill check in there to see if you can catch one of the fish, which is like a speed check, because you've got to be quick. And I ended up getting a critical success on it, which happens in the thing again. So it let me keep the fish, and I've got that fish in my inventory, and I can look at it, and it's like it's talking in a dead language. You have no idea what it's saying.
Good fish.
So, but that takes the developer kind of thinking about a few different possible interactions with this thing and setting the difficulty ahead of time. And that's hard to do. Like when I used to plan those sessions, what I would do is set difficulty ratings for a lot of anticipated main things you might try and do, but then wing it around and use them as a kind of barometer for everything else you were trying to do. Yeah. So I'd have an in-context way of saying, well, I thought you might try and jump over this gap, and actually happened, and that would be a 4. So if you're doing something else, then that's maybe less easier than that, and so on. So you are reliant on what the developers have programmed in, but it's I think more generous in its provision of options than most RPGs would be. So it's the spirit of the system, but not the letter of it, because obviously that's kind of impossible.
I played Don't Starve recently, and that's a survival game where you're in the wilderness, and whilst exploring, I found a lying robot, which the only description I can get of it is it comforts me with its sweet lies. And just your talking fish and ancient language made me think of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of it, like, it's interesting because you get plunged into what is basically a kind of medieval fantasy world, but with loads of weird science stuff. But every single individual thing you're doing is weird. Like, there's a person being executed in the first area you enter, and he's not being executed by, crucifixion or beheading or anything like that. He's had been drugged so that he's constantly speaking a stream of nightmares, which he actually is. However, these nightmares are then projected from his mouth as a tendril of kind of intestine flesh, which is being spun into a noose for him by a homunculus made to look exactly like him, made out of his own flesh.
Holy shit.
And then nearby someone's got like Cthulhu in a jar.
This just sounds like Skyrim, really. There's an execution in Skyrim and stuff. It's just like that.
But yeah, like, I think if it can keep up that pace of interesting stuff. I mean, the other thing they've said about it, which is, it'll be interesting to see, is they're planning on making it a shorter, more repeatable game. So I suppose with regards to the choices you have, that's important too. That the idea is to make something that's a little bit more compact as an overall experience, but has much broader depth of interaction with individual things, which I think is quite a nice direction for a game like this as well. Because like Pillars is this, 200 hours sprawling mega game, and it'd be quite nice to have something you just dip into the story from a few different angles.
I haven't finished anything in ages. We finished Oxenfree, that's quite short. It's sort of like 4-ish hours. But like, this conversation has reminded me I still haven't finished Dragon Age Inquisition. And I didn't finish Fallout 4, I didn't finish Pillars of Eternity. RPGs, basically. I don't finish RPGs anymore. I'd like to go back to Dragon Age, though. Of those, I think that's the only one.
Yeah, Dragon Age is great. Like it has, I think it's worth finishing. Like its best moments, I think, are in its middle kind of self-contained episodes. But yeah.
How about you guys? Are you running out of time or is there like a type of game that you no longer finish that you used to?
I only really play Rainbow Six anymore, so it's kind of a moot point.
Have you finished it?
Yes.
Solve the siege.
The boss battle with Tom Clancy's Ghost is traumatic, but in a way beautiful.
A fitting send-off.
Oh, God. Sorry, Tom Clancy. I do
breached the wall of his tomb. It's weird that new games are released under his name, isn't it? I mean, I know he's like a brand, but it's sort of like it's an author.
What do they do?
It's like the War Disney.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose Disney's a person.
What do they do with Dirt? There's Dirt and its various sequels.
That's Colin McRae.
Yeah, they've dropped his name now.
Yeah. Maybe they lost the license, or his estate didn't want that to be the case. Or
well, I imagine they were probably paying the estate for the use of the name, so they probably wanted to not do that.
Are there new Tom Clancy books?
Not that I know of, but maybe.
Because there's a guy whose job title is Chief Tom Clancy Writer, and it's not Tom Clancy.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably, or at least Ubisoft think it's enough of a brand now that it's worth perpetuating.
Yeah. It's just weird because you sort of like, if J.K. Rowling died and then they made a new Harry Potter book and it was called J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, and it'd be like, is it though? I think games, it's just assumed that it's a brand with games. But then Sid Meier, if he dies, they can't call the next one Sid Meier Civilization 9, can they?
They could.
Were the ones which weren't helmed by him still called Sid Meier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like Soren Johnson's.
Yeah, I suppose. Seems wrong to me. Seems like most of the time we don't say who made the thing in the title. So on the rare occasions that we do, that person should at least be alive, for God's sake.
If they've not been in some way their psyche embedded in the actual code itself, take their name off it.
Yeah, the digital ghost of Sid Meier imprinted on Civ 9.
Yeah.
Speaking of Civ 5, we saw a great YouTube video of that recently. Did we?
Yes, we did.
Chris watched it, I know.
Yeah, it was on
the worst way to win the deity game in Civ 5. It's a sort of a let's play where a guy sets out to win in 50 turns. I think a deity win, is it like you research something in particular, or you
I thought it might be the hardest difficulty level.
Oh, it's the difficulty level, right. And he starts as Venice and is constantly fighting the evil empire of Canada. And it's only like 4 minutes long, but it's like one of the best let's play type things. It's not really a let's play because it's so edited and so compressed, obviously, because it's a game of Civ, which
in 4 minutes, yeah,
probably took weeks. But like for a playthrough, having a story and having twists and turns and stuff, it's remarkably good.
Yeah, it's very good and a great twist.
Yeah, we should link it in the show notes.
Absolutely should.
What's the other thing you've been playing, Chris?
Oh yeah, I have also been playing Elite Dangerous Horizons, as Elite continues to gain subtitles. Only a year in its life, and it's got 2 now. Because that's actually the name of the game, is Elite Dangerous Space Horizons.
Space Horizons, not even a dash.
No. Well, the horizons are in space.
They're in space, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No dash, just like an implicit comma. So I've been playing a bunch of this, and actually speaking of not having time to play games, like Elite was one of the things that I do go back to because at its basic level, it has the best interface of any video game, I think, just in terms of feeling like you're in a place doing a thing. Like I'll never really get into Truck Simulator, I think, but I will always be into the way Elite presents fucking docking and undocking and the clunky clanking of motorized platforms as they spin and spit you back out into space. And that's what I want to go, really. But Horizons is the expansion. I only just started playing, actually. It came out late last year, which is the one that adds planetary landings on atmosphereless planets, basically. So you can land on moons and rocks in space. But it's all, randomly generated, as is the rest of the game. And it's remarkably good. Like it, fits a lot of the other sort of criteria that the game has in terms of feeling really kind of real, like a simulation. But I wanted to tell one story basically from that experience, which kind of sums up why I think Elite's great, but also maybe why it's terrible. So the last 10 hours of my Elite life have been spent, I moved away from killing people for money in space. And, hang on. I can't talk and receive rum at the same time. and moved to smuggling, basically, because I wanted to do try something different. And there's a whole cool sort of, jury-rigged way of smuggling, which involves like, locking all the heat inside your own hull. So you have like a 0 heat signature outside to the outside world, which means you can't be scanned by station defenses, but the heat builds up inside your hull, so you have to like jettison your heat sinks and stuff. And so it adds this whole extra dimension to docking, where you're going in with your shields off and ice covering your windows because you're trying to stay as cold as possible. They let you dock even though there's no way you're on the scanners, which is sort of weird, but so that's a sort of fun. It's fun just simply because of the rhythm of going through the motions of doing this procedure in order to dock stealthily. And I'm doing this in Imperial space. And I get a mission to advance with the Empire to increase my standing with them, which is to basically deliver a covert bribe to a prison. And a prison is one of like it's a planet side base. So it's the first time I've ever had to deliver something to a city on a planet rather than a station. And I know it's a prison because it's called Hume Prison, and it's in this system nearby. And so all this stuff is procedurally generated, like the name of the place and the prison and so on. And the fact that it's a prison, I think it could have been any one of them, a couple of hundred other words they could have used, but it creates a sort of sense of what you're doing, just sort of implicitly. Like Elite gets really good when you're capable of sort of filling in the gaps imaginatively with kind of what you're being asked to do. So I'm delivering 2 tons of silver to a prison, which is,
subtle bribe.
Yeah, subtle bribe. So I head to this system, and I've never done one of these missions before. And I get there, and there are no planets at all. There's a huge debris field, a big sun, there's a bit of traffic. It's not deserted, but it counts as deep space. There's a lot of unknown kind of like stellar bodies, but I can't see anything. There's a station off in the distance, so I go there, and there's a gas giant nearby, and it has, huge rings, and the rings are full of asteroids, but no planets. Can't find the prison anywhere, and there's a nearby like ice planet, but it's got an atmosphere. It's like forming. It's like halfway to becoming an actual planet in 1 billion years. And so I'm like, is this bugged? Like, why is it giving me a mission to a prison that doesn't exist? How the hell do I do it? So I land on the station to see if I can buy a map from them, which is me like pulling over to the roadside services to see if they can sell an ordnance survey map, like ask for directions. And they don't sell any cartography data for the system, so I have to kind of, oh shit. But on that station, there's a mission for a shit, like 150 credits when we're dealing with, hundreds of thousands and millions normally, to deliver some sensitive illegal data to the prison. So I'm like, they want loads of silver and data. So this thing is here somewhere, but fuck knows where. So I'm like, shit, maybe this is just uncharted space, because, the way Elite works is if space belongs to one of the main factions, it's on most maps, and it'll tell you when you get into that system, this is the number of suns and planets and so on that are in this area. So you don't have to kind of guess, but that's all simulated as well based on how exploration works. So if you go somewhere which is just owned by a corporation and that data isn't public, then you don't necessarily know what's there. So then I realized there's a 15-minute timer on the deliver the sensitive data thing. So I warp out to a nearby system where I know there's a big station, dock at the station, go to the ship outfitting, remove one of my cargo bays and replace it with a long distance, like, stellar scanner, go back to the system. The best one I can afford has a range of about, I think it's 1,000 light seconds or something like that. So it's a long way, but it's not like the longest way, because some systems can be 20,000 across kind of thing. And so I go and I scan, and the scan this time picks up that the gas giant that I found does have moons sort of bedded in the asteroid belt that I hadn't seen. Scan them. There's a city on one of them, but it's the wrong name. It's not the right place. At which point I've got like 5 minutes left to deliver this sensitive data to a prison I can't find. When I notice that there are, like, looking at the signatures of just NPC civilian ships, some of them are coming from a weird direction. There's a lot from the star, where the nav beacon is and where ships naturally come in, to this station and the gas giant. But they're also going out from the station at a weird angle. So I jet in that angle, and eventually I see what looks like a light that's slightly too big in the distance. And I blast the scanner again, and sure enough, there's another gas giant out there, just like out in the distance. And so I jet over there, and it's got a whole bunch of moons, and I scan some of them, but no prison. And then I see in the distance, I can just make out the rings of another gas giant, like hidden behind that one. So I jet that way, scan again, and this time I find it. And there's this huge sort of icy moon, looks like a golf ball in space, like absolutely like scarred with like, asteroid impact. And there on the surface is this tiny little black city, like just in the middle of nowhere. And so immediately feels like that's the shittest prison to end up in. Like, it's a corporate owned prison so far from anywhere that even if you're in the same star system as it, you have to go looking for it to find it. In the middle of fucking nowhere. It's I've got 2 minutes left. And I've never actually landed on a planet-side city before. So I just point, and I have to find out what side of the planet's on, obviously, because by the time I'm down to atmospheric flight, or low altitude flight, I don't want to be like flying around the entire curvature of the place. See it, pull up really sharply, just point the nose of my ship, like, at it. And it transitions seamlessly, to the first stage of planetary flight from, Super Cruise, which is the kind of like super accelerated going between planets thing. And you go seamlessly to like suddenly seeing the planet as a piece of 3D geometry that does map kind of one-to-one. And it feels really great. And then you hit this kind of like shudder, which I think is to disguise not a loading screen, but like a kind of, a transition. And your UI changes to a more aircraft style, like degrees above the horizon kind of thing. And it says like, glide mode initiated, and you feel it differently. Like,
oh man, sounds great.
Your ship can hover, obviously. It still behaves like a spaceship, because you have to presume you have fucking amazing space thrusters all over the ship, so it can sort of correct itself as a VTOL. But it feels heavier, and you're told that it's using more power to keep you upright than it would be in space, obviously. So it sort of is slower to turn, and I'm flying this Diamondback Scout, which is like a bit like a mini freighter. It looks a bit like a dropship kind of thing. And I have to bomb down to this city, which starts as like a little black speck and then emerges into this outpost with a skyscraper and individual landing pads. Ask to land and then bomb down. I managed to get down with a minute to go, and to deliver my sort of like big bribe and and secret data to this.
Do you get out of your ship?
You can. So the way that works is, you have, so I've done this thing and I'm just going to go explore. So you can land by default when you have Horizons, you can do that amount of thing, land on planets and glide down to planetary outposts and stuff. But you need to buy a special thing called a vehicle bay in order to get a buggy on your ship. And there's only one at the moment. It's called a Scarab. And it's like this little, it looks like a manned Mars rover, basically. It's like a 6-wheeled thing. The controls are, it controls a lot like the Mako. It's really bouncy. It has a jetpack and stuff, but it feels like it kind of should. And if you're docked on a city or whatever on a planet, then when you can, from your ship, you can choose to deploy in the Scarab, which way it sort of fades to black. And when it fades up, you'll kind of emerge onto a garage in the landing pad that you landed on. And then you can drive out and just drive around, and you can bugger off the horizon if you want, and drive as far as you like. And so I drove up the hill because the city was sort of in a crater, and I drove up to the rim of the crater and turned around. And like, there's the most amazing view where above me is the huge curvature of the gas giant that this moon is orbiting. And then beyond that, you can see the second gas giant, which was the second one I found, the one I saw this one from, when it seemed like a tiny speck on the horizon. And I know I keep saying that word, and that is bullshit, but nonetheless.
Doing their own marketing for them.
And then the distance, there's like the sun, which is now tiny, but like it's enough to kind of have this sort of like halo eclipse kind of effect as it comes around the rim of the gas giant. And it's the most extraordinary skybox. Like it really would, it'd be a brilliant piece of, if it was the backdrop for a space set Unreal Tournament map, you'd go up to the edge of the map and go, wow, look at that. But that is 100% dynamic because it's based on just the positioning of things in that system at that time, And so despite the slight bullshit of like, all right, all I'm doing is delivering things, and it's not even, it doesn't make any sense that they would tell me to deliver this thing and not tell me where the thing was or that it existed. The whole is kind of, and as ever with Elite, you have that experience a couple of times and you're like, wow, that was amazing. And then eventually you move away from it because that's what there is to the game, is moving things around in space and going, wow. But that is still fucking awesome. Like that, like the scope of the thing, and like suddenly sitting in your little buggy. Like I'd like to be able to get out and walk around, I think, in my spacesuit, just to really get that feeling of like how little you are.
Yeah.
But just sat there in my little buggy, like looking up at the entire distance I'd come from, that I had to buy a stellar scanner to see these things that are now so huge that, that distance in scale is something I don't think any other game does it that well. Like that sense of, peering to try and pick out, the difference between a star thousands of light years away and a planet a lot closer to being on the surface of something is really incredible. It's great.
I'm definitely going to play it, and it's very much my kind of game, and I possibly should have played it already. But just the fact that you can play it in VR means that I want to play it in VR. And then if I want to play it in VR, maybe I don't want to play it in Oculus. Maybe I want to wait for the Rift. And then that's what I'm waiting for, basically. And in a weird way, I'm sort of like saving it for the Vive. Like I want to, did I say Rift just now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I meant Vive.
Yeah.
Unlike the Oculus, I want to go for the Rift.
I think because it's so persistent, I don't think there's any harm in playing it both, but yeah.
Yeah. Also, I tend to only play things once, or, if I love them, then I'll keep playing them. But either way, I want my first experience to be the best, which is why I don't usually play things in early access. And so, although this isn't early access, I want to wait till the Vive is out. And then that'll just because Vive's very good at convincing you're in a reality. I like the idea that my only experience of that reality will be just,
yeah. I do like that idea. Like, really, I'm looking forward to re-experiencing all of these things in that way. Like,
The other thing I'd say for it is actually the really cool thing is you can also land anywhere on a planet. Just to clarify, it's not just landing pads on cities on planets you can land on. You can freeform land anywhere. You literally land a gear and land, and then your little buggy is actually deployed from a lift that comes down the bottom of the ship, and that's all. I mean, it's just the little elite things, but that's all done with a proper animation. Like, the only time it does like a fade to black is to get you from one cockpit to the other, because there isn't like an animation for getting out of your chair, going to the buggy and getting in the buggy. But when you don't realize how big your ship is until you get out of it, which is such a cool thing to kind of see it parked.
Yeah.
And you can also dismiss your ship, which makes it go up into orbit. So, which basically is to allow you to drive across the surface of a planet on your buggy and then call your ship back down somewhere else.
Cool.
But yeah, you can, there's something really cool about watching your ship take off, like, without you, and then you call it in and you can hear it, and like, which doesn't make any sense, but fuck it.
Also, if it gets destroyed by people while you're on the planet.
I think it basically despawns. I think it's sort of like taken as sort of out of the game world kind of thing, because otherwise that would really suck. Because then you'd be stuck in a buggy on a sort of
on a prison planet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But even worse if you're on a planet without a starport, where you can't even buy a new ship. Like, but yeah, the sort of feeling like watching it come down and land, and then you drive to the back, and then the buggy's wheels do a cool thing where they like pull up and fold in. And then the thing goes up in a lift, and then you fade back, and then you're in a cockpit, and then you sort of power up the engines, and then you're up and away, and you can just seamlessly do a hyperspace jump from atmosphere into the system, and then you're off again. No one knows the game is coming close to doing that at the moment.
Do you know how? Sorry.
Is it still the same character that you're playing back when you were a bounty hunter when it first came out?
Yeah, it's all contiguous. Like, it's the same bank account. All you are in Elite is a bank. all you are in Elite is a bank account. And a series of ratings that tell you how good at killing, capitalism, and exploration you are.
That's a video game.
It's a video. Yeah, exactly. But yeah.
Do you know how else they're going to carry on fleshing it out in the future?
So apparently Horizons is the first, because Horizons is like 30 quid in and of itself, but it's basically this year's season pass, and it's going to be a lot more updates over the course of the year. And I don't really know. Like, I think the obvious thing is there'll be other kinds of vehicles. And I think the deploying, like, you can sort of, to be honest, there may well be answers to this, and I'm just ill-informed, but it feels like they could do a lot more with the sort of the systems they've established in Horizons. So they've also added, which I won't talk about because I want to play a bit more of it, but CQC, which is the kind of multiplayer deathmatch version of Elite, where you can just load in and fly fighters against each other in deathmatch arenas, basically. And that has mini ships in it. So it uses some of the same ships as Elite, like the Sidewinder and the Eagle, which are like the smaller end of the ships normally. But it also has ships you can fly in that, which are only ever NPCs, which are like the little fighters, like don't have hyperdrives or cargo bays. So you can't do any of the kind of Elite stuff in them. But they are like tiny little, interceptor fighters. And they feel like, man, they need to add it so you can deploy them from the larger ships. Like that should be a feature. Now that you've got deploying buggies from ships that are landed, they've added the fighters to the other mode, so like having a fighter that you keep in your big trading ship and you deploy if you're in trouble seems like a thing they should do. And like, so that you can sort of see a lot of the angles for, I think the game's curse is that it will always be amazing at furnishing, like the first time you do that, it's going to feel fucking amazing, right? Where you like drop out the belly of your big hauler and the nimble little fighter and defend yourself or something, or your mate drops out. But then you'll do it 5 times and it become routine. Then you realize you're just exchanging, 5 tons of fish for this amount of money that buys you 6 tons of fish gets you this amount of money. But it
would be amazing if all the people who are queuing for a deathmatch game were like mercenaries, and you could offer them, like when you need fighters, you just look at what mercenaries are available and you say, look, I can pay any of you 20 credits if you can just defend me.
Sit in my cargo bay for a bit. Maybe you get to fight someone.
Well, like once you actually decide you need them to fight, that's when you look at the list and say, okay, who's available now? I can pay you 300 credits. And then they can say, well, this other guy's offering me 450. And
yeah, he's right behind you. So
he's the guy you're fighting, actually.
But yeah, I think in terms of, Star Citizen has some stuff on it in terms of like the fidelity of the animations and stuff and graphical fidelity, I guess. But in terms of actually doing this stuff in the present, like that reality of like landing on a planet is one of those kind of like holy shit moments where you expect it to kick you to a loading screen and it doesn't. And of course you're landing on a big rock. It's not the most complicated rendering task in the universe, I guess, to render a really, really big brown rock in space. but it still feels very impressive.
I have a newfound appreciation for all this stuff after trying to do much, much less ambitious things in 2D only and very much struggling with like just that transition thing. Like it's easy if you have a loading screen, but if you're trying to do it without loading screens, it's quite difficult.
Well, take it from Elite. The way to do that is to have your ship evocatively shudder. Because the way Elite does it is every time you go between like what will be a boundary, it goes like, and you think, oh wow, I'm definitely transitioning through some kind of boundary. And then it hitches slightly as it connects you to whatever it is actually connecting you to.
My problem right now is I don't have a sort of an existing way of doing like deferred loading. So if I'm going to load something, it all loads in one frame. And so the whole screen is going to be static. And if you have like a full screen interface, you can do that. If you have like a menu pop up and you ask people to confirm where they want to go, then you can freeze that for like a half a second. But if you're a spaceship flying around in space and I don't know what zoom level you're using, I don't know how much background you can see, what other ships are moving around. Anytime we pause the screen, you know the screen is paused. You know it's loading. There's no disguising it.
Shall we do questions from questions?
Yes. I shall do them. Jordan writes, if you have an object and then shrink it to half its size so that its atoms are twice as close together, whilst elsewhere you have two other completely identical instances of this object and teleport one into the other, which of these two occurrences would release the most energy? Asking for a friend. Thank you for your time, Jordan Pomagalski.
You didn't know that we are game journalists.
Shall we do homework from home?
I like this question because it's so left field. I mean, I don't know anything, ever, but to me it seems like the second one would release more energy because you have twice as many atoms. The atom density would be the same, because it's twice the density in both cases, but in the second one you have twice as many atoms, so if atom density is a thing that causes energy release, then I imagine there's more of it. I don't think
density of atoms made a difference to the amount of energy contained in them. I thought that was something else.
Which is because it will release the most energy. I guess he's presupposing that the bonds would in some way collapse and break. And so I suppose maybe the trick is in the second instance maybe nothing would happen, and in the first instance maybe crushing them down would cause them. Because I'm pretty sure atoms have a strong resistance to being closer together than they currently are. Like the reason they're in that arrangement is they're pushing against each other in some way.
I don't think atoms are real.
It's certainly not a PC game.
It's all a lie, perpetuated by NASA.
I will forward that question to my dad, who is literally a physicist. We'll maybe able to tell us the answer.
Everything made of tiny balls. It's bollocks.
I bought a laptop recently, and with it, as well as the normal packaging, the big puffy like bags of air, there was also
I can't wait to see how this relates.
There were several canisters of tiny balls, and they were. I think they were meant to be sealed, but they'd become breached in transit, and so just everything is just covered in tiny little, really hard, clear plastic balls, and they're just everywhere in my house now because I've opened it, and it's just fucking everywhere.
Oh, you don't want to be covered in balls.
But I don't know, what is the packaging benefit of that?
It's a message from the Illuminati, Tom.
They're rock hard.
Yeah, we had a ball spillage in our kitchen a while ago. I was hoovering up for days and days.
What was that?
I thought it was something that was related to you. I thought you were to blame, naturally.
The ball crisis?
Yeah. Chris's balls crisis.
I don't remember unleashing a little horde of tiny balls across the
tiny little plastic white, well, not white, but transparent balls.
Could that have been? I don't know. Like, I've unpacked some things in the kitchen, but like not like
ages ago. Anyway. Yeah. But, yeah. Anyway, the
mystery.
The ball balls. Mystery will remain a mystery.
If anyone can answer that, please write in. Leo writes, "Hey, computer numerical controls. As a fan of pen and paper RPGs, I often wish for a method of live game mastering of PC games for friends. I looked into the Neverwinter Nights games, but the tools are too clunky for the type of on-the-fly games I run. Sword Coast Legends look closer, but still not quite what I was hoping for. So my question is, do you think the game tools will ever have the speed and flexibility required for actually dealing with those pesky players and their disrupting of my carefully laid plans? Also, do you think these ideas would ever expand upon the genre of more classic RPGs and enter the world of action RPGs or third-person shooters? Or would this just eat up too much time and too many development resources to be worth it?"
The cop-out answer here is a Google Hangout and Google Docs, because if you want to actually do a pen and paper RPG, then that is basically PowerPoint presentation hooked up to a video chat is like the best thing you're going to get on the internet.
And you should all wear suits and rent a conference room.
I could foresee a Sleep is Death like game where you have a large number of different kind of graphical assets that you can combine together, but in every other way the game rules are circumscribed by your conversation. As soon as you start enshrining the rules of the game within some kind of code, within some kind of mechanic that is pre-described by the game, then no, it's never going to be as flexible as a human. Well, not never, but within our lifetimes.
Robots never as bendy as a human. That's a fact.
Sleep is Death is an amazing game, and I wish it
apart from that one Terminator.
I wish it had more influence.
Sorry, I just got that.
I didn't hear that.
It's never mind.
It was a callback. Never mind.
Okay. Also, I totally forgot that it was called Sleep is Death until you mentioned it then. I was thinking of that Jason Aurora game that let you DM, and then when you said it, I was like, that's a fucking weird name for that game. Mark Frostick writes, I have got a sneak peek at this year's A-Levels paper and wondered what you thought about the questions and complaints. The exams are getting easier. Media studies.
And homework from homework.
Media studies A-Level. Creating Crowbar Examining Board, May 2016. Answer all 3 questions and show your workings. Total of 100 marks. Question 1. Films based on computer games aren't very good. What do you think is the best film based on a computer game, or least worse? 1 mark. Question 2. What is the best game based on a film? Discuss. 1 mark. Question 3. Draw your favourite character from Dota and colour them in. 98 marks. Thanks for sitting quietly in an old sports hole for 2 hours, everybody.
Yeah, I'd come to the defence of media studies actually.
I thought you were going to say a game film.
Yeah, I think it's. The accusation against it is that it's a silly Mickey Mouse subject that nobody should really ever do and doesn't lead to any.
Mickey Mouse should do it.
That doesn't lead to any kind of definable career, and certain aspects of that ring true. in that it probably won't lead to any kind of useful career because obviously journalism is dead now in the age of the internet.
Yeah.
But I did a media studies course as part of my English literature degree at Cardiff, because in the first year at Cardiff you get to choose 3 different degrees, and then you carry on doing the main one after that. But I did media studies. It was absolutely fascinating. It was incredibly leniently examined, like ludicrously so. There was a multiple choice exam in that, which isn't something that should happen at degree level, I don't think. And it was very, very easy. But the actual, the examination of it aside, the actual subject matter itself was very interesting. It gave me tools to, not just, it talked about the way that the business of the media has been. This was before, like, Nick Davis wrote Flat Earth News, for example, and it covered a lot of the same things. So it talks about the business of the media, changing the message of the media, and how advertising and all these other things have manipulated the kind of messages that we receive through our TVs and radios and on the internet. And that was very useful, I think, and a completely worthwhile spending of my time. But yeah. So yeah, I don't think media degrees are a complete waste of time.
What character would you draw, Chris?
In an A-level exam?
For a Dota 2 character, your favourite?
I'd draw Wisp.
That's
literally just a blue ball. And then I would, I don't know, go smoke a doobie or something like that, being 16.
Tom Thornton writes, I made the switch from a shite screen to 144 Hz G-Sync. Turns out my reflexes aren't shot at 33 years. Same revelations, anyone? Also, G-Sync autocorrects to gay community. I love that, not just because the subject matters are so far apart, but just because the letters are so far apart. There's just nothing like G-Sync. It's got a Y in it.
I haven't found that with monitors. I haven't tried, but I haven't experimented with really high refresh rates.
I know from the electric sports scene that wants a whole bunch of tournaments. The electrical sports.
It's never occurred to me that that's actually what it stands for.
You can't mock electrical sports, Tom. Like electric mail. Once a bunch of Dota tournaments started using 144 Hz monitors, the professional electric sportsman wouldn't have anything else. So certainly has an effect on them.
144 is a hell of a...
That's a lot of hertz.
Electric Mail also autocorrects to the gay community.
I mean, like, a normal monitor is like 60 hertz. So when you're getting more than 60 frames a second, it's not doing anything. But I have noticed, I've been looking at laptops lately, and a bunch of them are like 75 hertz and have G-Sync, so that they will actually be 75 hertz. So you get 75 FPS. And
what is G-Sync?
It's a thing like, so you know VSync?
Yeah.
VSync
Ain't nothing but a V-Sync. I'm sorry.
The problem with displaying graphics sometimes is that your monitor is refreshing 60 times a second, and so if you're getting like 55 frames a second, it can't actually give you 55 frames a second. Or, sorry, if you're getting like 65, it can't give you 65. Anyway, basically, sometimes the refresh rate, the time when the game is ready to show you a new frame, the monitor is not ready to display a new frame because it has its own limitations on when it can display it. And G-Sync is a way of getting around that. And that's the NVIDIA one, and I think Radeon have their own version of it. And both of them basically mean that usually the disadvantage of turning on VSync is that the game runs slower because it won't go, it has to be a multiple of like 30 FPS or 60 FPS or whatever. And so it will just slow it down until it is that. Whereas if you run it at an unlocked frame rate, then it will run as fast as it possibly can, but you get tearing where half the screen is loaded and the other half is still on the last frame, and so you get that weird kind of break in the screen. And G-Sync is a way that it can run as fast as it would without VSync, but also ensure that you don't get tearing.
Cool. I've noticed
the gay community is.
I've noticed that things like tick rate and stuff like that do affect the degree. I mean, obviously, everybody knows that lag affects them when their skill level when they're playing games. But it's surprising how minute a part of time needs to be missing in order to disrupt your play. So I suppose even something like 60 frames a second probably does make a difference.
It's really noticeable in some games where if you have VSync on, the mouse movement becomes really sluggish. And if you ever had that problem with like a new game, if you turn VSync off, often it solves it. I remember Dead Space, it was a big deal. Everyone was up in arms about it. And then it was put forward that actually it's just common knowledge amongst PC gamers that if you have sluggish mouse movement, of course you turn VSync off.
Yeah, I need that.
Yeah, I questioned that at the time. Matthew Cooksey writes, what are your pre-gaming rituals? Personally, Rocket League and Ollie Ollie demand full wristwatch removal for maximum agility. I have, I don't have like a super clean desk, or it's clean, but it's just piled high with papers and stuff. But I can't have a tall object on my right-hand side. If there's like a bottle or something on the right-hand side, it's not that I'm going to hit it or anything. It's just kind of, it catches the eye for some reason and it needs to be gone.
You need that, that desk real estate to smash iPhones on, don't you?
I have recently cracked my iPhone screen.
I didn't think I had an answer to this, but I always empty my pockets. Like my keys and my wallet in my pocket. I find that really distracting.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I emptied my pockets before doing this podcast because I've got to be in the zone for the podcast. Kind of full focus. Marsh, any rituals?
No. None.
Scoo writes, what is your favourite game butt? Don't care what gender the butt is. The butt has to be a butt. No ifs, just butts.
That's quite good.
Sam Fisher's got a great butt. It looks really good in his wetsuit. I also, you have to admire the many different kinds of butts and their various cladding in Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain. Because obviously you see a fully naked ass flapping. Well, the ass isn't flapping, but between the flaps of a medical robe in the first few minutes.
A flapping naked ass. Did you see the latest Feminist Frequency?
No, I didn't actually, no.
It's about how female butts are showcased, but also that was a thing I was familiar with. The thing I hadn't really noticed is how well male butts are hidden. Sort of, like, so many male protagonists in games have capes or sort of just like little skirts, basically, to conceal the butt so that it's not too sexual, it's not too in your face.
No.
Not Sam Fisher.
There are lots of examples in the Feminist Frequency thing, but obviously you don't know how representative it is. But yeah, Metal Gear.
Did you mention any examples of this?
Assassin's Creed, obviously every single Assassin's Creed game.
Well, he's wearing a cape. I suppose that's
what she's saying. Like, there's always an excuse for a cape to be in there, and things like God of War and a lot of like third-person console games that I'm not as familiar with. There are so many little like tunics and loincloths and things just dangling down there.
Huh. Maybe it's I'm sure she's done more research on this matter than I have because she's produced a video about it. But there must be a difference between the degree to which the male butt is considered as like a point of erogyny than it is on a woman, and maybe that is also like I don't know.
I think it's considered a point of erogyny on men for people who are attracted to men.
To the same extent, I don't know. I just don't know. But like Kratos out of God of War is, he's a big. He's not under-sexualized in that he is a kind of...
Well, I think there's like a sort of a rippling, muscly torso and big biceps are kind of...
But also
can be considered appealing to men as well. For I want to be the big strong guy, but I don't want to look at his ass. If I can avoid it, I don't want to look at his ass. James Vokes writes, in a similar vein, sexy butts. Do we need more of them or less of them? What about in games? Both good jokes in the butt questions.
Good jokes in the butt questions. Everybody.
Podcast title like that.
Well, I'm probably for more sexy butts.
I think responsible use of sexy butts.
Yeah, exactly. Fine. You don't want to over-egg the butt, do you?
And we thought we already had the podcast title.
I was thinking, even-handed, equitable deployment of sexy butts that presumes no particular viewpoint on the part of the
nice bum, nice bum, you know.
I'll tell you what, I've noticed
that's a universal constant.
Yeah, like the Planck constant in many ways.
No, that's a lie.
Good consistency.
All matter is made out of is tiny, tiny little bums.
Exactly. Not balls, bums.
There is quite a good butt icon.
Checkmate MRAs.
Can't get away from them no matter how hard you try. There's quite a good butt icon in Nuclear Throne because one of the level ups you can get is called Throne Butt. It's a game in which you're questing to find the Nuclear Throne, and I'd be interested to know what the thought process was in this, but they needed a name for the perk that is different for every character. So most of the perks are the same, but there's one perk that just enhances their special ability. And so it doesn't have a name that's unique to what it does. Well, I probably could, but it doesn't. And so it's called Throne Butt, which I guess is like, if the Nuclear Throne is a universally good thing, then, I don't know, having a butt suitable for the throne makes you more good at what you already do. But the icon for that, also because these icons need to be generic, they pick a particular character and then they show that character sort of having this mutation. And for Throne Butt, they pick Crystal, who is usually just a giant purple angular crystal, but then has a very rounded, bulging, shiny butt for the Throne Butt icon.
Nuclear Throne is the only game for which I've drawn erotic fan art for. So,
what did you draw?
Plant and fish making out. And fish does have a pretty sweet bum in that picture as well.
Why, may we ask?
I don't remember. It's probably a good idea, though.
You're not like you don't play the game particularly, do you?
I did at the time, but, you know.
What happens on Marty's secret Tumblr?
Until now. Mental Penguin writes, Chris talked about diegetic and exegetic UIs before. Are there any examples of energetic UIs? So diegetic and exegetic, you're going to have to remind me which way round it is, but one of them is the UIs kind of in world, and the other one is...
Yeah,
okay.
Exegetic.
And then exegetic is it's like drawn on top of the game in a very artificial way.
Oh, I assume he's making a pithy joke there, because energetic sounds
like a pithy
similar.
joke to me.
But I thought it was quite an interesting question, though, because there are UIs which are designed to be disruptive in some way to the player's experience. I think quite a lot of the kind of colourful psychedelic shmups use UIs which warp or change in colour or otherwise obscured in order to become part of the game mechanic.
Fucking Pony Island.
Pony Island,
fucks with you all the fucking time.
Yeah.
With UIs. There's also Sumotori Dreams, which is I feel like it's the sort of precursor to Gang Beasts for physics-driven animation, where you are two sumo wrestlers made of blocks, and you stagger around like drunkards and fall into each other and fall over. But the menu for that, because it's so physicsy and it has these planks that kind of can be broken through and disintegrate well, the menu is made of those planks and they're chained together by ropes, and so the whole menu is physics, and the way you select a button is to just throw a cube at it that smashes the plank. And throwing cubes, you can also do that to the sumo wrestlers as well for some reason. That's like the standard physics test. Anyone who's showing off their physics engine always has you just fire cubes from the camera to like dent the car or to knock over the castle or whatever. That's quite an interesting UI. I also wanted to say, because this is a bee in my bonnet, that I fucking hate UIs where as you move the cursor around, the menu options move in the opposite direction. It's meant to give you this kind of sort of tilting interactive feel, but like Crysis 2 and I think Crysis 3 do it. And it means that as you're moving the mouse to click on something, the location that you're moving the mouse to is often invalid by the time the mouse arrives there because the button has moved out of the way in the opposite direction. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. I have enough problems in life. I don't need this extra one.
But it makes you feel like you're in a cool holographic bowl.
No, it doesn't.
What if it did?
That would be a poor trade-off, in my opinion. That is all the questions we have time for.
If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can email us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can leave a question on the forum at crateandcrowbar.com/forum. You can discuss future questions, probably about butts, on our Discord chat channel, which you can find details of on the sidebar of the main website and likely in the post for this very episode. If you'd like to send us a question on Twitter or just follow us, that's at Crate and Crowbar. And you can also support us on Patreon. And we're very grateful for those who already do. That's at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. And if you'd like to follow us at oh god, I got so far.
Oh, you did so well. I was really impressed.
If you'd like to follow us,
fat tongue fucked it up.
I did fuck it up. If you'd like to follow us as individuals, that's hard to say. I've only said it like 100 times. If you'd like to follow us as individuals, I'm at C Thurston, CTHURSTEN.
I'm a Marsh Davis. It's DAVIES.
I'm at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
Thanks for listening, everybody.